Morning. Our opening words today, in honor of Passover, which began yesterday evening, are from a reading called "It Is Our Journey Together" by Deborah Hafner. We are on a journey. We didn't plan it. We didn't have time for the bread to rise. We may find ourselves in the wilderness, hungry and thirsty, doubting that we should have ever come. But look around. We're not alone. It is our journey together. A journey to our better selves, a journey to a better world, a journey to a more promised land. The flaming chalice is the symbol of Unitarian Universalism. We light our chalice in honor of the journeys we are all on, separately and together, and as a beacon helping us find our way. Our opening hymn is number 347, Gather the Spirit. Please rise in body or spirit as you're able.
So welcome to First Parish in Bedford, a Unitarian Universalist congregation where we come together every week as a people with diverse beliefs and a shared commitment to bring more peace, more love, more justice, and more joy into the world. Gather to celebrate. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whether you worship one God, many gods, or no God, you are welcome here. I want to say a special welcome to our visitors this morning in person and on Zoom. We are so glad you're with us on this Sunday morning. Here in the sanctuary, you're invited to fill out a blue connection card, which you'll find at the end of the pews, and you can give it to one of the ushers during the offertory or leave it at the welcome table outside of the common area. We will add you to our mailing list. In Zoom, we'll put a link in the chat to a form that you can open up and fill out a virtual connection card. Parents and caregivers of little ones, there is a nursery available downstairs for your convenience, but we are always delighted to have little ones right here in our sanctuary with us as well. After the service, there will be coffee and tea and fellowship and cake in the common room. Everyone is welcome to join us. And we have a few announcements today. The gallery at First Parish is proud to welcome its newest show to our gallery called All the Colors by award-winning artist Nicole Stewart. There will be an artist reception for the show today after the service from 11:30 to 1 in the gallery upstairs, and everyone is invited to the reception. I want to say a special thank you to everyone who made the Food for Thought gathering on Friday and the pancake breakfast on Sunday such successful events. So Friday night, we had 24 people of all ages sharing a meal and activities and just generally connecting in a multi-generational conversation about art. So thank you to all the families who came out, and especially to Nate, our Director of Faith Development for Children, for leading the event and making it happen. And then yesterday, on pole capping day, despite the snow on the ground, more than 20 volunteers came out and served pancakes to over 120 hungry patriots. And at the same time, they raised some money for our partner church in Abyszwava, Transylvania. So a huge thank you to our volunteers and to the partner church for making that happen. And we tip our hat to Rich Doherty, who led the event for so many years and who we know was with us in spirit. We hope you got some pancakes to eat in Indiana, Rich. This coming Friday, we will be having a special Good Friday or Tenebrae service here at 7 p.m. And then please note there are 2 Easter services. There's a traditional service with the adult choir and guest musicians at 9 a.m. There's a more family-friendly service featuring the youth choirs at 11 a.m. There's coffee hour in between and an egg hunt on the common after, so don't miss it. And these are great services to invite a friend to. Just saying. Now, our final announcement. Our annual pledge drive ends next Sunday, April 20th. We are in the home stretch, and we have a ways to go. So as of today, we have 111 pledges, totaling $398,000, which is about 2/3 of our goal of $584,000. So if you have pledged, thank you so much. We appreciate your generosity. If you have not, you can pledge online at our website or contact the office. And now to tell us a little bit more about why pledging matters and to bring it all home, I'm going to turn it over to First Parish members Linda Politz and Jean Kalm.
Thank you, Jamie.
Hi, I'm Gene Kalb.
And I'm Linda Politz.
We're here to share the reasons we pledge to First Parish. We'll keep it short because we're firm believers in more is better, except for pledges for First Parish, of course.
Less is more.
Less is more. What?
Guess who's the editor in the family?
When we ask ourselves the question, why do we support First Parish, we naturally think of the usual reasons: community, sense of belonging, camaraderie, coffee, and of course, music.
All those are surely true, but it's more than that. First Parish has become a safe haven for us. When there's trouble in the community, in the world, First Parish serves as a place for us to find refuge from the storm.
The thing about havens, though, is that they don't just exist. They need to be maintained. They need to be staffed. They need to be nurtured.
We're living in a time that is unsettling, to say the least. It's downright scary. We're very grateful to have this haven available to us, a place to find comfort, a place to find resolve, a place to find hope.
First Parish is an institution that has literally been here since the beginning of Bedford's founding. Its members have been through the American Revolution, Civil War, the Great Depression, 2 world wars, global pandemics, race riots, and a lot more.
Throughout all those tumultuous times, First Parish survived, thrived, because of the commitment of its members. Those members, and now us, were stewards of this place. We take stewardship seriously, and accordingly, we give as generously as we are able. We hope you will do the same too. After all, it's your generous gifts that will keep this safe haven thriving throughout our current turmoil and in the years to come. And now we'll close with a quote from Minister Emeritus John Gibbons. John once said, "I've never once regretted being generous." That goes for deeds, for actions, and for money. So please take that to heart as you are filling out your pledge card. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda and Jean. That is it for announcements today. So now if you will please rise in body or spirit, we will recite together our unison affirmation that we say every Sunday. The words are in your order of service. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio es su ley. Este es nuestro gran pacto, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en espíritu de amor, y ayudarnos los unos a los otros. Please be seated.
Good morning. So, not so long ago, there was a tiny village named Obeck, where Passover was a very, 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 very big deal. In Obeck, every year, the entire town gathered to watch the baker make the Passover. Drum roll, please. Matzah, based on tradition. Now, Obeck didn't just make ordinary matzah. No. They made award-winning matzah. Crispy, flat, delicious in a dry, mildly disappointing way. But this year, something strange was going on. The town's baker, Bobby Merriam, was missing. Not taken by Pharaoh missing, more like on a Caribbean cruise with her yoga group missing. But she left a note. Back in 8 days, don't burn the village down. Love, Bobby. No recipe, no exact ingredients. With Bubby gone, the town panicked. No one else knew the exact recipe. Sure, they watched her, but how closely, right? So Rebecca, the town tailor, said, we'll follow the basics. Flour, water, no yeast, and no problem. Spoiler alert, there was a problem. First, Rivka from the general store brought almond flour. It's healthier, she said. But the dough turned to paste. Then Avi, the local science teacher, tried to streamline the process using his solar power dehydrator. The matzah exploded, and a goose went missing. Then Mendel, the blacksmith, suggested, we should make it round this year. Rectangles are out and circles are in. And the matzah came out looking like a burnt frisbee of doom. Huzzah! Finally, the rabbi said, enough! Everyone stop! You're overthinking it. Matzah is simple. It's not gourmet. It's about story, about memory, and about proper digestion. So they went back to the basics. Plain flour, plain water, mixed and baked it under 18 minutes, just as tradition says, or at least what they remembered from Bubby Miriam. The result? Was it tasty? Not really. Did it crack when you looked at it funny? Absolutely. Did it remind them of the hurried journey of the Hebrew people, the value of simplicity, and the miracle of community? You bet. So when Bubby Miriam returned, tanned, and wearing a sun hat the size of a cedar plate, she tried their version. She took one bite. I'm not going to even try, but pretend. Paused, then smiled. It tastes a bit like cardboard. I'm so proud of you. I hope this story reminds us that the spirit of community within Passover, which began with the Hebrews' flight to freedom, is much alive. It carries on through tradition, through togetherness, and yes, sometimes through the bland things we eat. Now let us sing the children to class.
Okay, there we go. Hello, my name is Lisa Toline, and I'm a member of the Lay Pastoral Care Team. This is the time in our service when you can share your joys and your concerns. We ask that you come forward, you state your name, and please be brief. We'll go first in the sanctuary and then on Zoom. So I will light this last candle for those joys and sorrows that we hold quietly in our hearts.
How is this night different from all other nights? Last night was the first night of Passover. Observant Jews have a Seder dinner on the first and second nights of this holiday. I am not an observant Jew, more of a lapsed Jew or an occasional Jew, so don't trust me too much on the details of this holiday. Although I have been to several Seders in my life. The first one I remember was on Kwajalein. I think I was around 4 or 5 years old. The meal was at the Yukwayak Club. If you ask my mother, she will say, "This is the day I learned to eat hard-boiled eggs." One thing to note about Seders is that despite this being a very food-focused celebration with lots of symbolism in the dishes, the part where you eat anything of substance takes a while, so you get hungry. And if you're an adult, you've also had 4 cups of wine, so. I don't remember the hard-boiled eggs at this Seder. I do remember finding the afikomen. Early in the meal, a piece of matzah is broken, and a portion of it, which is the afikomen, is wrapped up and hidden away for the children to be found, for the children to find later. The child who finds it then ransoms it back. I found it. My reward was hard mint candies. I did not like mint, so I gave them to my father. Now, he doesn't remember the mints, but that's okay, because I don't remember the eggs. what I do kind of remember in a very hazy early childhood kind of way is that it was more than just our family that gathered together. I don't remember very clearly, but I assume it was the Jewish community on Kwajalein, which can't have been that large because there just frankly weren't that many people there. There were other adults I knew, and probably some I didn't, and I felt very special to have found that prize. Also shy and uncertain, this negotiating, as it was unfamiliar. Kwaj in the 1970s was a special place. There was a lot of freedom for a child to go out and play with minimal structure and supervision. There were no TVs. It was pretty much the people there were the people you interacted with. So although I felt like I was free and meandering as a 4 or 5-year-old, I assume that the adults in the community all felt some responsibility to the children who were not their own, much as I think we do here. And this is part of what community means to me, this shared commitment and responsibility to one another. Back on the mainland, there were other seders that I went to. My grandfather sometimes would come, or often would come to my parents' house, and as the youngest, I got to ask the 4 questions, which are really the same question over and over. Many people with small children can relate to that. This one traditionally has 4 different answers. There's a lot of symbolism in the food. Bitter herbs represent the bitterness of slavery. Charoset, which is a mixture of apples and nuts and spices, symbolizes mortar. I don't know why you'd want to eat mortar, but mortar that the Jewish slaves would use to build the structures for Egypt. Parsley dipped in salt water to remind us of the tears. For once we were slaves in Egypt, we say, and now we are free. One of my favorite symbols is the extra place set for Elijah, which I always took to mean that there is always space for one more. We don't do a full Seder anymore. It's a long meal. It's a lot of sitting. You get hungry. We gather with family. We eat some of the traditional foods. We take joy in being together. Last night's dinner was at my house for the first time. My mother, who usually hosts, has been scaling back over the last year. She had cataract surgery in November, so I hosted Thanksgiving. Hanukkah started on Christmas, so we observed both at my house. And now she's recovering from a second round of elbow surgery. She's not supposed to pick up heavy things. She made the matzo ball soup and a flourless chocolate cake. Natalie made some vegetables. I made the main dish and some potatoes. Instead of next year in Jerusalem, which is a traditional part of the service or the meal, it's next year at Carlton Willard. I'm not sure if I miss the ritual of the longer meal, but the truth is we have been scaling it back for years. As I write this, I do feel a sense of loss. I'm not able to do all the pieces that my mother did, and at this point she can't really either. I don't have confidence in my own memory of how and what to do. I had to double check the names of some of the symbolic elements I mentioned earlier. I am an occasional Jew, and at these holidays I am reminded of what I am missing. But I also look out this morning at all of you, and I am reminded of what I have. I still have that sense of community.
On the lighter side, a Unitarian Universalist was out on his boat fishing when suddenly the Loch Ness Monster rose up out of the lake and attacked his boat. The Loch Ness Monster grabbed the bow of the boat in its huge mouth, flipped the Unitarian Universalist way up into the air, opened its mouth wide, prepared to catch the guy in its mouth and eat him. As the Unitarian Universalist fell towards that huge mouth filled with sharp teeth, without thinking, he said, "Oh my God, please help me." And suddenly, time froze. As the guy hung there in midair, a huge voice boomed out. "I thought you didn't believe in a personal God. one you could call on in a time of crisis. Hey, give me a break, God, said the Unitarian Universalist. A minute ago, I didn't believe in the Loch Ness Monster either. And with that laugh, please give generously.
Thank you, Liz and Carol and Brad. So Passover began yesterday evening and extends through Sunday, April 20th, so happy Passover to all who celebrate. Our worship theme for our April services is liberation. And Passover, the Passover story, is one of the key dramatic moments in the Exodus story, and the Exodus story is one of the great liberation stories in human history. It is perhaps the foundational liberation story here in the West. Right? This is the Torah story that most people know, possibly by way of Charlton Heston. This is the one with Moses and the burning bush, the evil Pharaoh and the flight of the Jews out of Egypt, the parting of the Red Sea, 40 years in the desert, manna from heaven, the 10 Commandments, the golden calf, the Ark of the Covenant, and the journey to the Promised Land. All this and more. It is an epic story. Now let's revisit it just a little bit. Moses was born to a Jewish mother at a time in ancient history when a large population of Jews were living as slaves in the kingdom of Egypt. The Pharaoh, the god king of Egypt, kept the Jews terribly oppressed as slaves, but even so, he was afraid of the growing population of Jews within his kingdom, and he was afraid that this group of people, by sheer numbers, might one day be large enough to overpower the Egyptians. So he puts out an order one year that all of the firstborn Jewish males are to be put to death. And that all Jewish males, all of the newly born Jewish males are to be put to death. And the midwives actually defy this wicked order, as women are often an unheralded source of resistance to evil in the Bible. And this gives Moses' mother enough time to put her infant son in a reed basket, and she sends him afloat down the Nile, entrusting his fate to her God. And the infant son, as it happens, is pulled from the water downstream by one of the Pharaoh's daughters. She names him Moses, and he is raised as an Egyptian royal inside the splendor of the palace. But Moses is aware that he is Hebrew, presumably having learned this from his Egyptian mother. And one day, as a young man, he is out on a walk and he sees a cruel Egyptian overseer beating a Hebrew slave. And he falls into a rage and he kills the overseer. And now he realizes that he is surely going to be put to death for this crime, so Moses flees Egypt to the land of Midian, where he starts a new life as a humble shepherd. And one day Moses is out tending his flocks and he sees a bush that is on fire but not consumed by the flames. And curious as anyone would be, he goes over to check it out, and that's when he hears that voice of God booming down out of the sky, saying, "I am the God of your ancestors," commanding Moses to go confront the Pharaoh, free his people, and lead them out of Egypt. And what happens next is my favorite part of the story, because in response, Moses starts arguing with God. Right? In the Jewish scripture, the heroes often argue with, complain to, or even accuse God. And so Moses says, "What, me? Are you serious? Like, who am I?" And God says, "Don't worry, I will be with you." And Moses says, "Well, who are you?" And God says in one of the great moments in religious history, he says, "I am who I am. Tell the Israelites that I am has sent you." We're going to pause a moment. The name that God gives for God is a set of letters that is usually transliterated as Yahweh, YHWH. It's actually an unpronounceable word, deliberately so. But these letters are derived from the Hebrew word for the verb to be, in its grammatically unrestricted form. And UU minister Anna Levy-Lyons, in her book No Other Gods, explains that the name Yahweh, from to be, identifies God with being itself. With all that is, with all that has been, all that will be. God is the ground of all that is. God is the ground of everything that will become, and God is the becoming, the creative process by which life and all things spring into being. God begins this little story as a specific God. He says, Moses, I am the God of your ancestors. And then pivots to say, I am the ultimate all. I am being itself. And it is under the authority of this name, under the authority of ultimate reality, the essence of being, the essence of becoming, of freedom, that Moses is to command the Pharaoh to free his people. So in some sense, then, we're to understand that being demands freedom. Being is meant to be free. Now, Moses argues with God some more. He is concerned that God is commanding him to march into an empire where he is a wanted criminal, to confront the all-powerful and merciless king, and to demand that the king free all of his slaves. That is a lot. He is really concerned when he realizes that this will involve public speaking. Maybe some of you can relate. That is the deal breaker for Moses. And he literally begs God to send anyone else so that he does not have to speak in public, until God finally says, fine, whatever, your brother Aaron can do the public speaking. And only then does Moses agree to go. And then, spoiler alert, Moses does free his people from Egypt. It does not go smoothly, to put it mildly. It is a terribly violent and tragic story, and the Passover story itself is a piece of this tragic violence. It is also a story of courage and hope, and of a brave man and a brave people confronting the powers of evil. And because Moses is willing to step forward, to answer the call of being itself, and to step forward on behalf of freedom and undertake this impossible thing, God does as promised and overthrows the power of the Pharaoh and all of his armies. Moses leads his people out of bondage and into the desert on a journey towards freedom. That also does not go smoothly. Right? The Jews almost starve in the desert. They are attacked by enemies. They lose faith in their leaders. They wonder if it almost wouldn't have been better to remain slaves. Freedom is hard. But then they arrive at Mount Sinai when Moses goes up to the mountaintop in the presence of God again, and God delivers to Moses the 10 Commandments, plus a whole lot of other laws. And Anna Levy-Lyons points out again that when God delivers the 10 Commandments to the Jews, God identifies God with these words, I am your God who brought you out from the land of Egypt, from a house of slaves. That is the preamble to the 10 Commandments. I am your God who brought you out of Egypt. So God is a specific God again, but this time identified with an act of liberation that took place in history, right? Yahweh is now not an abstract God of philosophy, being itself. Yahweh is now God as liberator, a God who sides with the oppressed, a God who acts in history, a God who frees. So the Exodus story is returning again to this idea that freedom is divinely ordained, that we are in some sense meant to be free. And this idea that God intends the oppressed to be free has been a powerful spur to liberty throughout human history. It was the guiding liberation myth of enslaved African Americans in this country. It still is a story of hope and inspiration to oppressed people all over the world. And shortly after freeing the Jews and leading them out of the land of Egypt, God delivers them to the 10 Commandments. That is, God gives them the precepts of an ethical society as a covenant, that word might be familiar to you use, to prevent them from becoming oppressors in turn. What is intended is not freedom as a mere license to do whatever one will, not freedom as the freedom of the powerful to enact their will, the kind of freedom the Pharaoh had. What is intended is freedom as lived out in ethical community. Now, Unitarian Universalism claims this kind of freedom as central to our religious heritage. Our non-creedal way of doing religion begins with the idea that no test of belief should ever be imposed on us. In fact, all UU congregations in the Unitarian Universalist Association are explicitly forbidden from requiring adherence to a creed. In our 7 principles, we talk about a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience, democratic processes, acceptance of one another. We talk about the goal of world community with liberty and peace and justice for all. We have a commitment to religious freedom within our communities, and we have a vision of liberty for the world, and we strive to make that vision a reality. And if you look at our history, we have strove to make that reality again and again and again. At all of the moments of crisis in our nation's history, we have been a people who have stepped forward on behalf of liberty. A couple of weeks ago, addressing this particular moment in our nation's history, I said we are at a time when we can no longer take the values of political liberalism for granted, right? Ideas like due process, separation of powers, individual rights, civil liberties, which to be sure were never perfectly applied in America. These values can no longer be assumed as common values. We need to make the case for their importance all over again. And for our Unitarian Universalist religion, if we're going to claim freedom as a central religious value, we should be prepared to talk about what is the ground of freedom for us religiously. What is it in our way of seeing the world leads us to say not only that people should be free, but that people must be free? What is it that leads us to act and even to dare in the name of freedom? Now, since we UUs have different spiritual beliefs, we may think of this differently or use different language. Everyone needs to decide this for themselves. But I wanted to offer this morning some ways in which UUs have generally understood the ground of freedom for us. And the first ground of freedom is reason. Historically, for us, is reason. Because humans are rational animals who uniquely survive and flourish through reason and science, we must be free to seek the truth for ourselves and to act on it. Tyranny and reason are opposites. Reason does not respond to force and threats and compulsion. It responds to facts and evidence and ultimately to reality. So to threaten the free mind is to threaten the foundation of human flourishing. And to impose tyranny on a people, to replace the free mind with fear and coercion, is a disaster to individuals and to society. The second ground of freedom for UUs is free will. In some religious traditions, humans are understood as inherently wicked or inherently sinful. Think of religious teachings like original sin, for example. And when humans are understood to be in some way incapable of choosing the good, when humans are understood as inherently inclined to evil, then oppressive laws are justified in the name of safety. Right? Tyranny so often begins with an appeal to law and order. It says people are too dangerous, too violent, too corrupt, too sexually irresponsible, too lazy, too dishonest to be allowed to be free. Only the police state, it is said, can protect us from the evil that is out there. And religious liberals, including UUs, reject these doctrines of original sin and generally have a much more optimistic view of human nature. We emphasize all the ways that humans build community, cooperate with each other, support each other, and lift each other up. And sometimes it is true, liberals have been overly optimistic about human goodness. But at the end of the day, UUs, our religion emphasizes that human beings have choice. We have free will. We can learn, we can grow, and we can choose better. And where there are structures of oppression or injustice in the world, like racism or poverty, we can choose to create something better. And tyranny replaces consent and creativity with the threat of force. It dehumanizes us by replacing our free will, the very seat of our humanity, with coercion and violence. The third ground of liberty for UUs is the inherent worth and dignity of each person. This is an assertion that each person is an end in themselves and never just a means to an end. It says we must never view other people as instruments. That is the way of slavery. When we allow people to be treated as disposable, we deny their worth and dignity, we rob them of their humanity, and this robs all of us of our humanity. And this is perhaps the most purely religious statement we make. We say, using whatever theological language works for us, that humans are sacred, that there is something inviolate in our being, that we each matter, and our mattering cannot and must not be taken away. And there are different ways of grounding this religious statement, that humans have inherent worth and dignity. Theists might say we are each made in the image of God, and so we are inherently sacred as God is sacred. Some might say we each carry the spark of the divine within us, and we are an expression of the divine working itself out in the universe. A humanist might say each human being is a unique and never to be repeated expression of the creative power of the universe. And there is magic and mystery in the unfolding of our being, that there is something glorious in the human spirit. Tyranny is no respecter of the human spirit, which is why art and music and literature and philosophy and science and other expressions of the human spirit inevitably go underground when freedom is lost. Unitarian Universalists also understand, like the Exodus story, that freedom is not the same thing as mere license. Freedom is not the mad scramble of all for all. In Exodus, freedom takes place within ethical society, in covenant. In the classical liberal vision that UUs have promoted, freedom is exercised within an ordered and ethical society, which itself is built upon frameworks like the separation of powers, a government of laws and not men, civil rights, democratic processes, and a basic understanding that society should provide an opportunity for flourishing for all of its people. And within this framework, freedom can be messy and negotiated. Disagreements happen. Bad laws are sometimes passed. Solvable problems go unsolved. The pendulum swings between liberal and conservative. But when the framework holds, this is not tyranny. It is just the messiness of democracy. In UU religious community, we promote the idea of covenant, that our relationships should be based on consent and an agreement. And sometimes we consent to bounds on our own behavior for the flourishing of all. But beneath that is the framework of freedom of belief and the right of conscience and the exercise of democracy. And we know that sometimes UU community can be messy too, because freedom can be messy. But we should also be proud of our commitment to democracy, to freedom, and to inclusion, knowing that sometimes we hold these values in tension. The 19th century minister and liberal theologian Henry Ward Beecher said, "Liberty is the soul's right to breathe." Liberty is the soul's right to breathe. In the Hebrew Bible, breath or ruach is another word for spirit. And the creation story begins with the ruach of God, the breath of God, the great I am, moving over the formless waters, bringing all into being. So breath is a symbol of the creative power of God. And liberty is our soul's right to breathe, to create, to bring our best self into being. It is our right to take up space, to seek the truth as best we can, to inhabit our unique bodies, and to co-create beautiful things with our neighbors. And it is also our responsibility to resist the forces of oppression and to act for the liberation of all. The meaning of the Exodus story is that we are meant to be free, that being itself cries out against tyranny, and the meaning is that in the end, freedom will win. In honor of Passover, may we, like so many throughout history and all around the world, take courage and inspiration from this story and this truth. Liberty is the soul's right to breathe, and freedom will win. Blessed be, and amen. Our closing hymn today is number 146, Soon the Day Will Arrive. Please rise in body or spirit. Our closing words are from the book of Isaiah. For you shall go out in joy and be led back in peace. The mountains and the hills before you shall burst into song, and the trees of the fields themselves shall clap their hands. Go in joy, go in peace.